Hey, this is Joe from the DocumentDB team. What I'm going to show you today is 5 pretty quick and easy ways to optimize for costs when you're using Amazon DocumentDB. So what I'm going to show you is how to use T3 medium instances, which we just launched on June 30th, which provide a much lower cost point for small production clusters or dev test or for getting started. I'm going to talk about how single instance clusters can show you how to save a bunch of money but still have highly durable data. We'll discuss how DocumentDB's auto-scaling storage and I/O helps you optimize for costs, as you don't have to pay for things that you don't use. Show you how to start and stop a cluster to bring compute down to 0 when you're no longer using the cluster. And I'll show you how cost allocation tags can be used to get much more granular reporting into the cost for a particular cluster or a particular environment like Dev, Stage, or Test, for instance. All right, so in the DocumentDB Management Console, first thing I want to show you is how to use T3 instances. So I go to provision a cluster and I say my cluster. The first thing I'm going to look at is, our 5 large 3-instance cluster is going to cost me, this is in Canada in the central region, so this is going to cost me 92 cents an hour. Well, the first thing I want to do is go down here and say, hey, I'm just going to get started, right? So I'm going to use the T3 medium instances, right? So we went from 92 cents an hour down to 26 cents an hour, right? That's a significant cost saving, especially for getting started or small dev test workloads. The other thing I want to show you, right, is the number of instances in a cluster. Now, DocumentDB has a unique cloud-native storage architecture where the storage and compute are actually physically separated. There's no attached volume disk like an EBS-mounted volume, for instance. So that allows DocumentDB to do is to be able to scale compute and storage independently. It also means that the data is durable and replicated independent of the number of instances there are in the cluster. So if you go down to a 1-instance cluster, you still have highly durable 6-way replicated data across 3 AZs, but you only have 1 compute instance, right? So you can drop your cost down now to 9 cents, from 92 cents when we started to 9 cents an hour for getting started, right? So I can create a 1-instance T3 medium cluster, and that helps me optimize for cost. Now the third thing here that you'll notice, and I'll click advanced settings so that I'm not hiding anything, right? You kind of scroll down here, network settings, cluster options, encryption at rest, backup, log exports, maintenance, tags and deletion protection. You don't see anywhere where you provision a DocumentDB cluster where you tell how much storage or I/O you want to provision for that cluster. And the reason for that being is that DocumentDB actually auto-scales storage and I/O for you, so you only pay for the storage and I/O that you use, not for what you provision, right? So you don't have to go in and say, well, I think I need 3,000 IOPS this month and 600 gigs of storage. And if you don't use that, or you don't hit your high water mark, then you pay for all that unallocated space. So DocumentDB storage and I/O auto-scale, which helps you optimize for your costs, is you're only really paying for the stuff that you use. So, okay, so that's useful. So we have single instance T3 medium clusters. Now I've already created one ahead of time. And one of the things, you say, okay, that's great, Joe. We created a 1-instance cluster, but what happens if, I need to be able to add additional instances to this cluster because I want to go from being kind of a 1-instance cluster to, maybe even running a small dev test workload or a small prod workload on here, right? So I can go in and I can add additional instances, right? I can say, hey, I want to add 2 more T3 medium instances, or, I wouldn't advise doing this, or you can add 2 instances of different sizes. And you can add instances to a cluster at any time. And because the separation of storage and compute, adding instances to a DocumentDB cluster is not a function of how much the storage size is. We don't have to copy that storage volume around. It takes about 5 to 7 minutes, regardless of whether you have 100 gigs or 1.5 terabytes worth of data to add a new instance to your cluster. Similarly, I can go to the instance that I created and I can say, hey, I want to scale up this instance, right? Like T3 medium, actually I need more RAM for my particular application, so I can scale up from a T3 medium to an R5 large, hit continue, and then the scale action occurs. So you have a lot of flexibility to continue to adjust your cluster to meet your needs as you develop and build out your application. Okay, So the fourth way I want to talk about optimizing for cost is in stopping and starting a cluster. Now with the cluster I have, let's say it's Friday afternoon, and I know I'm not going to be doing any dev over the workload, right? I can go to my cluster and I can hit stop, right? What that will do is it'll bring my compute down to 0. So that 9 cents per hour that I was paying for before, I won't pay that until I start my cluster again. So it's a really good way to save costs if you're not going to do something overnight, or if you're going to be away from your dev environment over the weekend, right? Why pay for those resources when you don't need them? And then when I come back on Monday morning, I can say, hey, I can click start because I already have this cluster in a stopped state. I can click start, go get a cup of coffee, and my cluster will be back to where I needed it, where I left it off on Friday afternoon, and I can resume my development and test. Now, so that was the fourth way. The fifth way I want to show you how to optimize for costs. And if we go into our clusters, right, I can click on my cluster here. There's a concept of tags in AWS, and you can tag clusters for a number of reasons. In DocumentDB, you can tag both clusters and instances for the purpose of finer granularity of reporting for cost, right? We call this cost allocation tags. And what that enables you to do is to be able to say, instead of just getting that monthly bill, at the end of the month where you just say, hey, in this region, I spent this much on instances and IO and storage for DocumentDB, you can go and you can do much more granular reporting, even at the cluster level, per hour, per day, per month. Or you can group, tag sets together and say, hey, I want to tag all my production resources. I want to tag everything in staging or dev. So you can have much finer granular cost allocation and attribution to particular environments. So this is one I've already set up, right? So you can see DocumentDB charges on 4 dimensions, right? So this is instance charges, storage, IO, and backup. And this is reporting on a daily measurement based off of usage types. So you can see that, hey, I had a workload that used quite a bit of IO on day 1, but it is kind of reduced over time. So I can kind of use this both to kind of troubleshoot my app, but I also have a good understanding of where my costs are coming from. I can say, hey, that was kind of anomalous. I wonder what was going on in my app at that time. Or, hey, this should be normal. Why, is something not happening in my app that I expect to see this much IO from? Right, so this is a really useful way. You might come back and say, hey, Joe, well, how do I do this for my cluster? Well, I want to show you one of the really great resources in DocumentDB. If you go to the DocumentDB homepage, and you click on resources, on this page there's a lot of really good information. There's the 10 most recent announcements, right? So you can see, hey, we just added support for cross-region snapshot copy, and here's the 6:30 launch for T3 medium instances, and 16 additional CloudWatch metrics, and some new indexing capabilities, and RBAC. The other section that's really good is the blog section. So this is where we'll talk about different things about how to use DocumentDB. We'll show some examples of, like, say, the Bundesliga or Woot being successful at DocumentDB. I wrote a blog that goes into much more detail than we're covering today on how to optimize for cost. But the one that's particular to this chat today is cost allocation tags, right? So in this blog, I'll just kind of walk you through the whole steps of adding tags to your existing clusters or adding tags to a new cluster, and then how you set up reporting, and then you're on your way. So there you have it. So in a few minutes, we just went through 5 ways to be able to help you optimize your cost on DocumentDB. T3 medium instances, significantly cheaper for getting started, dev test, or small production workloads. 1 instance clusters for getting started in dev test. Wouldn't recommend that for production workloads, but it's a good way to optimize for costs for dev test. Auto scaling storage and IO. You don't have to worry about setting these things in advance. You only pay for what you use. Well, we also have starting and stopping clusters when you're not using them to save on that compute cost over time, and then cost allocation tags. So thank you for your time. Appreciate you joining us, and hopefully we'll catch you again soon.